folks, I'm Shibit. Welcome to my video and to this tutorial. Welcome to my channel if you're new. If you're not new, thank you for coming back, and welcome to my little garden. So I'm here today to show you a very simple tutorial of how I do my inked papers and plant transfers. I've had many requests, so I really want to say thank you for being so interested. And I think, guys, that when you see how simple this process, you'll laugh because it's that easy. I use ink and I use paper and I use water, and that's about it. So if you want a leaf transfer on it, put a leaf on it. And that's about it. So I'm going to show you properly in a moment, in detail. If I turn the camera just down here a little bit, so that's the first part of the tutorial that I've already filmed. So you'll see that in a moment, and after this batch I'm going to do one more of a slightly different method. I mean, really slightly different method, because I can't stress how easy this is and how straightforward and simple. So you'll see that in a moment. Now, originally I was going to put this on one of the teaching sites, this video, as a like a paid tutorial lesson thing. But what I really wanted to do, because I've realised that I've been on YouTube for a year now, and I am absolutely entirely only here because I've had such a wonderful journey here, and that's entirely because of you guys and how kind you've been and how supportive. And I decided that I would like some way to say thank you, so I thought this would be a nice way, because I've had so many requests about these papers. So I'm hoping that you'll find something that you will enjoy doing yourselves and using in your crafts, in your hobbies. You know, they can be used for so many different things, these papers, and it's always lovely to bring nature into our art, I think. So I hope that this is going to work. It's really not terrifying at all, being here. I'm kind of wishing that my arms were about 12 feet longer. I'd be much happier if this camera was not quite as close to me, but I don't have a tripod, and so I'm hoping that the shaking is not too bad. And I'm going to get on and show you now the next part of the video. So thank you very much for coming, and thank you guys for being lovely, and I will see you soon. Hi guys, so this is the view of my garden table. This is the best view I can give you. Sorry if I'm shouting, I don't know what the sound is going to be like because I'm not stood right next to the camera like usual. So I'm putting on my gloves. So we're out in the garden. I have a plastic sheet on the table which I'm going to wet in a second. As you can see, I've got a tea bath with my papers, and I've got my leaves in just water, just cold water, just to stop them wilting. That's all that's for. So I'm going to move these out the way, but I just wanted to show you exactly what I'm doing. Okay, sorry for bashing you in the head. There's that one. And I'm just going to spread these papers out now, and I'm going to spray with water. This is my first tip, is that water is your friend. So don't be afraid to use water. Water is going to affect a lot of the techniques that you use with inking. As you can see, my tea-dyed papers are already wet, but I want the surface wet as well so that they stick as flat as possible to the table surface. Now last year when I started doing this, I was using it on a uncovered table because I don't mind that the table gets marked. So that's entirely up to you, but what I did find was that if you're using a wooden table like this, is that the ink gets stuck in the grain of the wood sometimes, and you can have an undesirable effect sometimes on your next batch, so you can get dark colours staining lighter papers perhaps on your next book, so totally up to you. So the plastic is just to keep it a bit cleaner. So my tea dye is not particularly strong. It actually is strong, but the papers haven't been in for very long. So you can see that under the brown, it's still not very dark, the papers. And in a moment I will finish spreading these out. If you are going on a foraging trip and you want to get your papers, get your leaves in advance, they will keep in the water for quite a few days. Just don't load them up too much. I have got a lot in this pan today because I'm doing a couple of different projects, but I'm just going to show you this one lot. So I'm hoping that you can see this at the moment. I have got a lot in here today, but if they're not touching too much, then you will be able to keep them nice for quite a few days if you're not inking on the same day that you're collecting. Okay, so I've got my inks, which are those Distress Spray Stains from Ranger, the Tim Holtz range, and I'm going to start spraying. I've just collected my greens and browns at the moment, and you're going to see how random this is. This is very okay, I think that one's run out. Very unplanned, and I'm not spraying every page the same colour. I have a friend behind me who's here for moral support today, who's promised to stay very quiet. Although, having said that, sorry about all the noise today. All that shouting and screaming is the school behind our house, and it sounds like they're having a bit of a sports day or something, or a sports lesson. So I'll keep picking this one up that's dead. Okay. So the way that you spray is going to also depend on which book. So at the moment I'm doing a woodland theme book. If you're watching my videos in order, you will have just seen a mermaid book. So if that's the reason why you're here, you probably want to do this slightly differently. And what I'm going to suggest for the mermaid is that you pat your papers dry a little bit on a towel before you start spraying, so that there's no excess water. And then as you spray, you're going to get more of an actual spray pattern. So you may want to try that. Now I'm just going to get my wet leaves and start placing them on the paper. So the type of leaves that you choose needs to be kind of thin leaves, so not usually not evergreen leaves, which tend to be thicker and glossier and heavier. They don't tend to ink as well, to transfer the images as well, because they're not as porous. So if you think of thinner leaves, you're going to get a better result. So the lady having this book likes aces, so I have some aces from the garden. I have some wild leaves from my walk this morning that I've collected some other trees. Spread those out a bit. Haven't used chestnut before, I'm going to see what that's like. And so there's a few from the walk, and there's a few kind of garden. I bought this especially for the leaves, actually. It's really pretty, very delicate. And what you want to do when you're pressing them on the paper is just make sure that they're as flat as possible, and if they need it, give them an extra little spray just to make them really stick down as much as you can. I think I've marked with that thing on that paper. We'll see if that comes out later. With the normally I use these for the tracing paper, which does work better, but we'll see what happens with those. So I'm going to show you the results when the papers are completely dry. So you can arrange them as you think that the papers are going to go in your book, or on your greeting card, or your scrapbook page, or however you're doing it. I'm not sure if you can see me in the corner here, but I'm just doing exactly the same thing on all the pages. Also for the seaweed, if you're doing mermaids or ocean, just remember that seaweed grows upwards, so you don't really want things like this dangling down, because it's not going to look like seaweed. So you want them growing up from the seabed, like so. Let me find some more space. Got a blank bit here. And if you find that your leaves are drying and curling up before the whole thing has had time to dry, just go in again, come back later and spray with water and make sure they're stuck down until all the paper and the ink is dried up. And the other thing to mention is that they normally stick better one way as opposed to the other way, and different leaves vary, but for the most part putting them face down makes them stick better. So just so that there's no confusion, this is not eco-dyeing, this is plant transfers. So you will get the shape of the, I mean it does look a bit like eco-dyeing, you'll get the shape of the leaves around the ink, or the ink around the leaves rather. And then just here I've got a bit that doesn't look like it's got a lot of wet ink, so you can just go in again and spray a little bit more, like that. With the mermaid ones, did I say this already? let your ink dry out a little bit and then go back and spray. So you can do in layers, and that's going to give you more of a kind of a sea foam, sea spray type effect. So I've still got leaves left, but I think that my papers I'm happy with at the moment. So I don't think there's anything more I had to say for this stage. So I'll see you back in a few hours. Bye. Okay, hi again folks. So a second batch of papers, and also a few things that I forgot to mention the first time. So I've rewatched the video. I've realised that parts of you weren't in frame, parts of me weren't in frame. Well, we don't want parts of me in frame, we want parts of the table in frame that weren't. That's what I'm trying to say. So I'm going to wet the table again, and the difference with this batch is that I'm not going to have the papers quite so saturated. When I do a book in this fashion, what I tend to do is do a few batches slightly different, and then you can have a nice variety. You can save some of your papers for next time. So they're not all going to look the same. And what I've got in the pan this time is some slightly different paper also. So what I'm using is copy paper, just very ordinary paper. But in a moment also in the pan I've got some nice drawing paper with a bit of texture, and that's also a little bit thicker. Actually, this copy paper is not ordinary, it's just slightly thicker. It's 100 GCM, so just slightly thicker, but it is, you know, fairly ordinary. I'm rambling again, can you tell? And the reason for that is because I'm not a good multitasker, unlike most women. So spread out. Okay, so you can see these pages are slightly different colour. I haven't tea dyed this time. And one thing that I'm going to try and encourage you all to do is to experiment and just vary what you're doing just slightly, and see which results that you like best. So the use of water is a definite, but how much water you use is going to depend on what you like, papers that you use is going to depend on what you like, and sometimes on your project too. So just at the moment I'm going to pause so I'm not boring you too much. Okay, so I'm going to start spraying. So I'm not sure if I said already, this batch isn't tea dyed. It's just wet on the in my pan of cold water. And I think you can probably already see from where you are that because I've packed the papers a little bit drier, that you're seeing more of a splatter effect. So that's going to depend entirely on what you prefer and what your project is. As I said, this one is a woodland. And also, what you might not be able to tell is that my edges are torn. I have deckled edges for this project because just for a more organic feel, so they're not too straight. Now on that first batch, I used some of these, and I'm going to get in frame this time. So where are we? Some of these with the sponge tips distress stain. I don't know what the difference is between these. Oh, that one's called a spray. Okay, so that's the only difference. It's the same ink inside. So these are actually really good for the tracing paper. I think that was probably the first time I used it on the paper. So I didn't like that as much. I started with these little, that's the first few that I ever bought, and they were fine, but I do prefer the sprays. And afterwards I'm going to show you that first batch where I was dabbing. It did make some marks that I don't like, so you know, you'd have to be careful of that. It doesn't tend to mark the tracing paper in the same way, and why I do like it for tracing paper is that you can get some nice you can get, what can you get? I lost my thought. You can get some nice watery effects because you get more of a spurt of ink, a concentrated blob of ink come out, if that makes sense. So exactly the same, I'm just patting these, and my leaves are wet again. I've still got them in the wet water bath. And I'm just trying to make sure that all these small leaflets are stuck down. I think that needs more water, if I can find my water. I haven't yet experimented with pressed leaves and flowers. I keep intending to, I keep running out of time on each project. So some things that perhaps don't want to sit perfectly flat on your paper while you're doing this, it might be easier to get them flat if you were to press them and dry them a little bit first. But then the question is, are they going to have the same effect? So that's where experimentation comes in. We shall have to see when we get time to try it. So there's not a lot of point in me telling you what leaves I'm using either, because that's going to entirely depend on where you live and what grows in your garden. And what's around you in the countryside. So, you know, go outside, see what's available, see what works best for you. If you don't have a garden, if you don't live in the countryside, you can go to the park and pick a buttercup, pick a couple of daisies and leaves. Don't think anyone will mind. If you can't go to the park, what I did yesterday was I went to my florist, local florist, and asked her for any scraps and cuttings that she might have, so she gave me a bag full. So that was the second time I did that. The first time I did that about a month ago, and I'm sure she must have thought I was mad, but she obliged. The customer is always right, apparently. And so, you know, if you feel like cheeky asking for things, I bought a little plant, you know, so it's not just a one-way thing. And when I'd finished my papers, I just used a couple of the little scraps to make a notebook, and took it as a thank you, a little gift, which went down very well. So this time when I turned up begging again, I think she didn't mind so much. And also die cuts you can use. If you have some nice botanical die cuts, then they are going to actually work exactly the same as putting leaves down. Of course they'll be more uniform, you're going to get the same shape, but you know, still pretty, and if that's all you've got, then that's what you should use. Inks are expensive, so you know, not everyone is going to be able to get lots of colours of inks, or any inks. And the first time that I did this, I did it with tea, just tea dyed paper, and left them in the sunshine to dry out with the leaves on, and that worked perfectly fine. So that's certainly something that you can do. And other things that I use, which I haven't today because I thought I'll just do it simply, and some of my dyes need replenishing and I haven't had time to do it. So I use fabric dyes, and I just get little spray bottles from eBay, empty spray bottles, and use those. So you can mix up fabric dye with water and have a go. You're going to find that they're not as strong, the pigments are not as strong, so don't dilute them too much with the fabric dyes. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with using Kool-Aid as a dye, but Kool-Aid certainly works too. Also slightly not as strong as buying dyes, of course, which are purpose made, but certainly worth it if you can't get inks, and if Kool-Aid is easily available. Kool-Aid used to be sold here when I was a little girl, but I don't think they sell it anymore. We have to get it online now. But I use it for my dyeing wool and fibres, and it works fine on paper too, so try that. And certainly any other inks that you happen to have in your craft stash, you know, use those. This is one of my favourites, which is, I hope you can see that, let me come round to the camera. This is Herb Robert, which I think is a kind of a geranium, a wild geranium, a cranesbill, is it called, something like that. So I am telling you that one because that does always give a very pretty effect. It's a very delicate leaf outline with lots of intricate detail, so I always like how they come out. And of course they're a weed, and since I never weed my garden, it is plentiful here. So just give me a second, guys, to check my list and see what I've forgotten to tell you. Yeah, I do prefer wet leaves rather than dry leaves. I think it works better. Sometimes when I'm experimenting, I will decide that one thing is better than another, and I can't always remember why I decided that, and so this is one of these instances. But I do find that the wet leaves are better, although I can't tell you why anymore. And yes, the reason for tearing your papers before you ink them is so that the ink will go into the tears and it'll look much better if you know, when you tear white paper, you leave a white edge. So in my opinion, this is a better way to do it, but you just have to remember to tear first. And yeah, I did actually intend to just show you that you could spray over the top of a leaf without inking the paper, but I've forgotten to do that, so that's something for you to try. I think that's all for now, guys. I'm going to finish this video now, and sorry, I'm just having a quick look at this list again, because there was a few things on it. So there's a few things that I think I'll tell you at the end as well, if there's any more, and now I'm rambling, so it's time to stop. Okay then, so this is now back to the first batch that we did. This is the very wet papers, and they're almost ready, but for the fact that I'm not liking the colour too much, because one of the browns that I've used has separated into kind of pinky tones, and where I'm looking at the camera it's very purpley. It doesn't really look like that in real life. But it is a slightly pinky brown, and here where you can see bright turquoise, this is a kind of minty green actually. My camera always seems to have trouble with blues and greens, I don't know why. So this in real life, there is quite a lot of green here, but it is a bit more blue than I want. So this paper is actually almost dry. And right here you can see these are the marks that I made with the blobby ink blobber thing. So they have faded quite a lot. So I may still use that, probably not for a page, maybe more for a collage. And I'm sorry, I'm holding the camera so that I can move around. If I just lift up this leaf, you can see how the leaf itself is actually still quite wet, and the paper underneath it is quite wet, although this area of paper is quite dry now. So it's not ready yet, but because of this colour, what I'm going to do is just ink a little bit more. So I wanted to actually show you, and this is slightly awkward since I'm holding the camera now. I'm just going to go over the whole thing with a bit more green and a bit more of the browns that I know are okay. I think it was one particular brown that separated into this pinky colour. So when I isolate which one that is, I'll know not to use it for woodlands. So I'm kind of going over quite a lot of the papers again. So I'm sorry about the lighting as well. I've moved these inside so that I could do the second batch, so that this is actually my dining table, on which we no longer dine because it's always covered in ink. So thank you, family, for giving up your table for me. I'm going to go over with a little bit of water again, and this is because I don't want too much of a splashy effect on a woodland book. See, this is where if you were doing an ocean book this would be absolutely fine and desirable, because you get splashes and sea spray. But for the woodland I want these colours to blend in a bit more. That one's okay, I'm going to leave a little bit. Okay, and if I just, peel back some of the leaves, let me see if I can get in frame. you can see that it's already making some really pretty imprints. And I was actually thinking about it. I'm wondering if the word transfer is the wrong thing to use. You can let me know, guys, if you can think of a better way to describe these. Because it's not technically transferring anything from one place to another, is it? But you know, for want of a better word. So we're just going to wait for those to dry entirely, so that the longer you leave it, the more dry you leave it, the better the effect will become. So actually, I'm dying to see what this one is looking like, so let's have a look at this one. Okay, I can see that it's working. You can see just a little bit of an impression, so I don't want to spoil it. And from time to time, whenever I walk past the table, I will just come and dab and just make sure that things are stuck down properly, so that you get the best impression. So as I was saying before, you can wet these if you want, and just press them down so that they are, where am I? This is really hard to coordinate. Okay. Okay, so pause till later. Okay guys, it is evening now, and I'm back briefly just to show you that I just wanted to show you every stage so it didn't seem like I'd missed anything out. So I'm on my way to bed, and before I go to bed I want to stack these papers so that they are weighted under a heavy book, so that they're nice and flat by morning to show you. So I'm going to start removing the leaves, and as you can see there is some nice patterning. It's going to develop slightly more after you've taken the leaf off. The leaf is dry. The paper underneath the leaf is probably 95% dry. So that one doesn't show very well at all. That might not do anything. Okay, but we have got some impressions, and although there's probably not much to see there, I think that that is going to develop more by morning. So we'll have to see. That one is a bit clearer. And that one looks pretty. Okay, so I'm just going to keep doing that, take all the leaves off. So I've got 2 batches, so there's going to be about 20 sheets, I think. And these are the ones that you saw me respray that are on the dining table. So the greens are looking better. And this great big leaf is holding a lot of water. And so where the ink has pooled on top, it does appear to be quite wet, but I don't think it is that wet underneath. So that's made a really clear impression. Yeah, it's like 95% dry. So we'll see what happens in the morning for the last part of the video. Good night, everyone. Good morning, everyone. I decided I would just do another quick batch this morning and just show you, because this is all mostly going into the same book, and I haven't done anything different at all to what you've seen me do, but I just wanted to show you that I was doing a batch of more slightly more autumnal colours, and once again the greens are not showing up very well. I'll probably add a bit more green to these yellow papers because she wanted a little bit of autumnal put in as well. Now, so for the most part, these are all the same. This one here, I decided when I was talking about it yesterday, I decided I might as well just try this and see what happens. So these are dried preserved leaves from last year. So I'm going to see what happens with that. This one I've put a skeleton leaf. I don't think that's going to work very well, but we'll see. And over here, one more dried leaf. And over here, I'll be absolutely thrilled if that one works. That's cow parsley. And when you know, if you know cow parsley, it's not going to lie flat on its own. So that's a preserved one, which means it's been pressed and it's nice and flat. So I'm trying that. It may not work, it may be too fine, but let's see. And the other little variation is this idea of Eva's from Bohemian Crafting. And I have here some textured wallpaper, and just instead of coffee like Eva was doing, I've just used some ink, and I'm not sure if this is going to work. It looks quite good so far. So all I've done is sprayed ink onto the wet wallpaper and put some wet tea dyed paper, just laid it over the top. Very simply, I haven't done anything else to it. So in the final part of this video, I'm going to show you the results from yesterday. I'm not going to add the results of this batch because this is just an ongoing thing, so I'm never going to finish this video otherwise. So I'll show you yesterday's results, and if these ones that I've been talking about turn out nicely, then I will point them out in the next book video that I'm doing. So that's the Woodland Journal coming up. And now I'm just going to pause and get on with showing you the papers. Okay, I've done my best not to mix up these two batches too much, well at all, so that if you wanted to, you could go back and reference what we were doing earlier. So this batch is the one that was patted dry, and so I'll just go through. So these are designed so that you would fold, so that's going to be up one side of the paper, and some of the prints have come out very nice. I'm not going to use all the papers, I'm not happy with all of them, but this is what I was saying yesterday, you know, do more than you think you're going to want. And also these are a very rustic batch, they're quite dark papers. This one's kind of ugly, I don't like this one. So I might use this for collage paper, you know, for backgrounds. And this one didn't come out too good, just a faint print here. And you can see that these ones that were patted dry, you do get a more splashy effect on the ink, where it hasn't blended too well or too much, you know. Too well depends on what you're wanting. That one with the that leaf that I was showing you particularly, that's come out quite pretty. That one is kind of faint again. So what I was wanting to say, I've just made a few notes to follow again. That you should certainly experiment, that you should adapt what you've seen me doing. You know, if you can't afford inks, that's totally the big bumblebee just buzzed in. Totally understandable and totally fine. Use what you can. You know, if you can't afford inks, use tea and coffee and Kool-Aid. Kool-Aid is quite cheap, and you can get a sachet for under £1 delivered, 1 or 2 packets. So you know, experiment and see what happens. If you don't have a garden, you know, as I was saying, just pick off one leaf off your favourite tree and bring it home. Just do one sheet. If you don't have a lot of space to spread out on a dining table, do one page, make that a feature page in your journal, make it into a mixed media, a collage, to framed, you know, to do whatever you want. But it doesn't have to be on a big scale. This batch here is the second batch, no, that's the second batch. This is the first batch, which we had very saturated papers. So you'll see that the colours are more blended. And again, I did use some dark inks on this one, so it may not be to everyone's taste, but you do get the effect and the method, the process that I've used, and you can adapt these. If you don't want this dark, you can also water down your inks. I do use water-soluble inks, the distress ones, but if you, I mean, don't water down your actual bottle, but you know, if you put it into another container, a few drops, and just used one from there, this one's a nice page, and just sprayed that a bit watered down, you know, that would be quite cool. And then you'd get lighter effects. That's the horse chestnut, so that actually came out quite nice. I'll use that one again. A word about drying. I do think that air drying is best. You can experiment if you like, but I don't think that heat gun is going to work. It's going to dry up your leaves and make them curl up too fast. But it might work perhaps if you're doing die cuts. I'm not sure, I haven't tried that with paper. You know, that probably would be fine actually. But I do think that the inks need a bit of time to saturate and to blend and to do their thing. So I prefer the slower method usually. So, you know, that's just my preference. So here is the marks that were made with that the ink blubber, which is not as bad as I thought. I could probably use that for a bit of collage or something, so it's okay, but I don't think I would use them on actual paper again. And for oven drying as well, oven drying is going to give you issues with using inks and plant material as well, so I wouldn't really go there if I were you, but that's your choice. And what else? So my papers yesterday, they took about 12 hours drying. That was a warm day in England with a breeze, but you know, that is English weather. We have a very damp environment. So if you're in a warmer country, a drier country, it's probably not going to take half as long. The other thing is, do please wear gloves, absolutely, especially if you're using fabric dyes. The inks that I was using yesterday, I don't mind so much getting on my hands, and you'll see that I was wearing gloves, but I am still a bit inky from where I've been just going past and dabbing the leaves down a bit. But if you're using fabric dyes, that's kind of dangerous, so do wear gloves all the time. And for ocean papers, what you can do once it is dry is just go in and just drip from your fingers a bit of water, some splash marks, and you can spray as well when the main paper is dry. If you spray with white also, as well as blues and greens, if you spray a little bit of white at the end, that usually turns out quite good for ocean effects. And for the backs, I'll show you the backs, and this is how they usually come out. So this is why I usually tea dye, but not always. Like for the beekeepers, I kept white papers. I didn't do any tea dyeing. For the mermaid book yesterday, I didn't do any tea dyeing. So you have to watch what happens with your backs. So you may want to either put pockets on the back, or just even go over a little bit once your fronts are finished. You can just go over with a bit of wet cotton wool and a bit of watered down ink, and you know, correct any bits that you don't like. So that's totally up to you. The other thing is that you can reuse your leaves. I forgot to say, when you finish with them, when they're taken off the paper, if you put them back in the water bath, they'll usually replenish, and that'll be totally fine. And you know, if you end up with papers that you don't like much, say for instance, there's not much happening on there, but there's one little leaf there, so instead of discarding the whole thing, do just use it for collages, use it for scraps. You can cut out that little section and use it on a greeting card. You know, if you tore around the edges, that would look so cute with a little stamp on it, or a little sentiment. So it's not wasted. I think that you can use, you know, everything. I know that I certainly do. So there's no reason to feel like you're wasting the paper. You know? And so, once more for emphasis, experiment, guys. Find the leaves that you like best, develop your method, try different papers. Water, time, patience, these are all good things. These are all your friends. And if you're doing this for a hobby, I think then all the more so, because crafting is about headspace as much as it is about the results. So, you know, enjoy the journey. Think about when you were 5 and you made mud pies. You know, you weren't making mud pies because you were hungry. It's not really about the results, it's about enjoying yourself. You know, you didn't stress about the result when you were 5. Don't stress about it now, just enjoy yourself. So what I'm going to do is, when this journal is finished, I will be doing a woodland kit to go with it, and no doubt I'll use some of these papers. So that will be on my website, which is shabidneri.com. And also I will be choosing a few of the nice papers from this session, and probably just doing some scans to put on the website also, but that won't be for, I imagine, at least a week. So a big thank you, guys. You have certainly made my journey very enjoyable, and much more enjoyable with you than I would have been on my own. So thank you, everyone. I hope that you have enjoyed this tutorial, and I will see you back soon. Bye, folks.